Hello and welcome to my fourth video, an instructional guide to stopping climate change. This week, we will look at how the long-term, lagged effects of climate change should shape our responses to the problem. But first, a little bit of context. When carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, it can stay there for a very long time. How long? Well, 60 to 80% of all the current CO2 emissions that are in the atmosphere right now will be absorbed into oceans within a few hundred years. I'll talk more about the problems this causes the oceans in a future video, but the rest, 20 to 40% of CO2 emissions, will stay in the atmosphere for many thousands of years. We need to stop adding to this stock of CO2 entirely, yet currently we are not even heading in the right direction. Every year, our emissions continue to grow. How can we achieve this goal? And what would a zero-emission world look like? It is the year 2100, and you, as the head of the Global Environmental Agency, have finally achieved your single and ultimate goal. Fossil fuel emissions have been reduced to zero. How did you do it? Well, improvements in technology helped quite a bit. In 2062, Zambian scientist Shuri Wright invented a machine to convert rotting food into pure energy. You never fully understood the more technical details of the process, but you knew the transformation of food waste was much more effective when a certain song was played in the background. The process needed good vibrations. So while this technology did aid your mission, it wasn't enough to stop CO2 emissions entirely. It was really the tax on fossil fuels that had the biggest impact. In fact, you remember it was the money raised from this tax that helped fund renewable energy tech in poorer countries in the first place. However, the technology was expensive, and nowhere near as cheap as fossil fuels had been before the tax, so a lot of people struggled to pay for basic electricity. You watched in despair as your popularity ratings plummeted, but you couldn't see any other way to reach the target of zero CO2 emissions by 2100 otherwise. It was for the good of the planet. A little suffering now for the future of humankind must surely be justified. But then it wasn't you who had to suffer. Thousands of people lost their jobs as fossil fuel companies collapsed. Hundreds of thousands of people had to choose between starving or paying their electricity bill, and millions more couldn't even afford that choice. To protect the forests, construction had to be stopped in its tracks, and so the house prices rose and the number of homeless people grew. It was a tough decision, but what was that old carnist saying? You had to break some eggs to make an omelette. Future generations would sing out your name in eternal gratitude. You still think you made the right choice. Immediate action was required. It had to be done. If the world had continued on its previous path, it might have meant the extinction of the entire human race. Even with all your strict taxes and eco-legislation, you still couldn't take back the decades of harm your forefathers had imposed on the environment. If only they had started to make changes earlier, maybe the world wouldn't have had to bear such volatile weather, ever-rising sea levels, and diseases reaching countries they had never threatened before. You knew when you first took such an important role that a trade-off needed to be made between the interests of those alive now and the interests of future generations. You knew that what was good for the future was all that mattered, but not everybody agreed. Many wanted society to continue as it was, believing that eventually a cheap, world-saving new technology or discovery had to emerge. Whilst you too were hopeful, you didn't think the future of the planet could be left to chance any longer. You knew many well-intentioned people had similarly noble plans. Your predecessor, for example, was known for sharing your environmental goal, but you weren't going to make the same mistakes as they did. Although they remained a popular leader for some time, the climate quickly caught up. Epic tropical storms and raging forest fires had caused a public movement demanding immediate and long-term action. That's why you stepped in. Your "Future Forever or For Never" campaign had spoken to the masses. You were strict, but you had to be. Without your difficult decisions, there's no way the world would have eliminated all emissions by 2100. There was no other way, was there? What do you think? My next video will show the direction current scientists, economists and governments are heading towards, and the compromises they are trying to find. To guarantee you don't miss that video, please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and if you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed this video. Also, check out the description for links to the articles I referred to in this video.